Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bridget and I am an artist and art educator. In this video, we will make watercolor flowers. I've first drawn a square on the paper, which will act as a frame for the flowers as well as be an element in the final piece. And within that frame, I'm drawing circles for where I want each of the flowers to be. I'm drawing a variety of circles, bigger circles, smaller circles, and I'm following a reference photo so I know where to position them and where they will look best. And once I'm happy with where my circles are, I'm taking an eraser to get rid of those intersecting lines where the square overlaps with the circles. I want to give the illusion that the flowers are bursting out of this frame. Now, since these flowers will be colored in with watercolor, I want to make sure that my lines are clean and neat, because once watercolor goes over pencil, you can't get rid of those pencil lines. So make sure you go over and erase any lines that you do not want to be permanent before adding the watercolor. Following the circles as guiding lines, I'm starting with the outside petals, so these petals will trace the outside line of the circles. I find that it's easier to control the size of the flower when you start from the outside and work your way in. I'm intentionally drawing my lines very lightly, that way they're easy to erase and easy to redraw if necessary. So roses can be very intimidating to draw. However, after drawing them for some time now, here are some of the things that I've learned. Roses are basically a spiral, so imagine a line that's sort of going all the way through the rose in like a spiral formation, and then the petals follow that line. So the petals are bigger towards the outside or the bottom of the rose and a lot smaller towards the middle or inside of the rose. I've also noticed that the petals of the rose fold over. So to create this illusion, basically you draw, I guess you could say, a rectangle, and at the top of that rectangle it remains straight or flat, and at the bottom of that rectangle it is a little bit jagged to give the illusion of a crinkly flower petal. Now this rectangle actually changes shape. It's sort of like a rectangular, I guess, triangle in a way, just the way the petal goes around in that spiral formation. But the same rule applies. The top line will be straight or smooth or angular, whereas the bottom line will be jaggedy. I find that when drawing roses, you can often get a little bit lost as you're drawing the lines. And for me, it's helpful to remember that the folds of each petal is separated by a space. So the lines don't necessarily have to touch each other or even overlap, but you can leave a space between each of these petal folds. And if you like, you can check out one of my previous videos called How to Draw Anything. And in that video, I teach you the basics, the foundations that you need to really be able to draw anything. And I specifically show you how to draw a rose, a very enlarged rose. That way you'll be able to see all the details of what I'm talking about here. And you'll notice that I'm drawing very slowly and very carefully. It's important to take your time. There is absolutely no rush here. Be sure to follow a reference photo of a rose, or better yet, if you have a rose in front of you, that could also be very helpful, especially when it comes to drawing bouquets and you want to have a variety of flowers. It's nice to be able to actually look at a variety of flowers instead of making it up. Now, as I draw petals closer to the center, you'll notice that the shapes change. I'm no longer drawing the folds of the flower, but instead I'm drawing the actual full petals that I can see at the center of the flower, and those shapes look differently. And those shapes I like to call football shapes, or even arches or ovals. But every rose center will look different depending on the angle, depending on the size of the rose, so pay attention to whatever your reference looks like. The lines get a lot smaller and a lot closer together, but that spiral shape still remains the same. So I'm just finishing up these last lines in the center of my rose, and then I'm taking my small eraser and erasing those lines that I don't want to be permanent. And now I am moving on to the other flowers in the bouquet. So So in this bouquet, I mostly have roses. It happens to be my wedding bouquet, so that's a lot of fun for me to draw. And then it also has some smaller flowers that I'm not sure what the name is. I also know that there are peonies in there as well. So all of these flowers have different ways of drawing them, and you can kind of see how I'm going about them a little bit differently from the others. And you'll really see the difference as I go in with the watercolor. So for my watercolors, I like to get them wet with a lot of water, so I create puddles to draw from rather than taking them directly from the tube. And that allows me to build up the color. With watercolor, it is so much easier to go darker than it is to go lighter, so that's why it's important to start off with very light color, so lots of water to your pigment. For this rose, I created my own blush color using burnt sienna and some rose. For these younger and smaller flowers, I'm using a nice light green. And I'm placing the pigment for all of my flowers wherever the darkest parts of the flower are. And then wherever there are highlights in the flower, I'm leaving those parts lighter or without any paint at all. Because with watercolor, although you could buy white watercolor paint, typically you would just use the white paper as your white. And for the pink flowers, I'm just using the rose by itself, the rose color that is, without any burnt sienna to it. And so you can see the difference that the burnt sienna makes to create that blush color of the first flower. So you might be wondering, how would I make white flowers? Well, the trick is to use some blue for the shadow while leaving most of the flower white. And so you can see how that effect is created with the white flowers that I have in this bouquet. And for the greenery in this bouquet, I've used a variety of shades of green. Now I'm going in with some black to make this really pop. So I'm filling in all of those blank spaces and following the edges of the square that are still visible and putting some black in those places. And you'll see how the painting really begins to pop and you can see those colors really come out. And this would be the definition of contrast. One color brings out the other color. One shade makes the other shade shine. So then I thought some of the flowers still looked a little bit unfinished, so I took a fine tip pen and just traced some of those flowers that are spilling over the edge of the black frame. And I found that this made the flowers look a little bit more resolved, a little bit more intentional. And there you have it. This is the final piece. If you like this video, give it a like, comment what you want to see next, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching!